Hey guys, welcome back and thanks for tuning in again. My friend Crockett20 tagged me in his video talking about a piece of nostalgic gear, so I need to share a piece of nostalgic gear with you guys. In fact, I'm going to talk about my favorite oldest knife. I'm glad he tagged me in this series because it gives me, I think, the right context to talk about something that I've been debating whether or not to share with you, something that happened to me pretty recently. But again, I think this is the right context to talk about it, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. But first, I want to tag two other people. I'm going to tag Doc Tac Dad and Hank Strange. You've been tagged. I want to hear stories about your favorite piece of nostalgic gear. Now let's get to my piece of nostalgic gear and talk about what it is. This right here is what I would call my favorite oldest knife. A very, very cheap piece of junk. It looks like it was bought at a swap meet. In fact, it wasn't. I'll tell you where I bought this here in a second, but I'll give you a closer look at it. As you can tell, it's some sort of a fake K-bar, a little K-bar imitation. Looks, essentially follows the same design cues as the old K-bar marine knife. Looks like it's got that blood groove right there, a little serrated back to it. Maybe it was probably released around the time that Rambo, the movie, came out. Got some gunshots happening over my head. Folks like to use this area to shoot. Plastic handle, very cheap looking pommel on it, probably pretty rusted as well. But that right there is my favorite oldest knife. And where did this knife come from and why does it bear some, significant nostalgic value to me? This knife was purchased for me when I was a little kid by my dad. Now, years and years and years ago, and some of you guys know this about me, I grew up in the state of Hawaii from about the age of 2 to the age of 10. 12 actually. And there in the state of Hawaii we had, there's so many stories I could tell you about my childhood, but one thing I'll stick to is a hiking trail near where I lived in the city of Laie that led to a place called Laie Falls. And Laie Falls was just this gorgeous, idyllic hike through lush vegetation across cane fields and things like that, and across this area that my friends and I affectionately called the Scrambling Hills, where we would ride our bikes up there, on Saturdays or whatever, and just kind of play in these dirt hills and slide down them and just get filthy. And we had such a great time there as kids. But again, the path to Laie Falls kind of crossed up and over to that area. And so my dad, who I took that hike with a couple of times, decided it might be nice for us to have a couple of decent knives to take with us on that hike. Survival knives, Not that we were going to get into any really hairy situations, but people take knives on hikes, and so did we. And I probably used this knife at some point to chop down some little bit of sugar cane, and chew on that on the trail, which was kind of a popular thing to do. Those cane fields belonged to somebody, but everybody that ever hiked there would cut down a little piece of one of those canes, skin it a little bit, and then chew on it, and it was sweet, and it tasted sugary. You'd spit out the pulp, obviously, but it was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of great memories of that. And so I probably used this knife at some point to do that. My dad, as I recall, bought this knife and two others like it. I have no idea where the other two ended up, from what I recall being called the Timberwolf catalog. Now, a friend of mine who lived across the street had that catalog, and I would look through it and kind of ogle over the knives and other cool things that they had for sale in there. And at some point I said to my dad, I'm like, could we please get something from this catalog? I think it's so cool. And he looked through it and he agreed. He thought this was all really cool stuff. So I kind of opened up a new side of my dad at that point. I was probably eight or so years old. And he agreed that we should buy something from there. So he looked up the price of this knife right here, which must have been just a few dollars at the time, decided to buy 3 of them. They arrived, we were pretty stoked. I kept them oiled like my friend told me to, tried to sharpen them as best I could, but didn't really know how. One of them actually came with a little bent tip, and that one seems to have a bent tip on it. I wonder if that's the one that initially had a bent tip. Anyway, but these became the knives that we took on hikes and campouts and things like that. And so that's basically the story of this knife. Again, I don't know if Timberwolf catalog is something any of you guys remember ever seeing or ordering from as kids, but this is, gosh, I'm kind of an old man now, and so this was probably back in the very early 80s. That's kind of what we had back then and where we found our information and learned about cool knives and things. And part of the reason I feel like this piece of gear right here is a significant thing to talk about right now is because my dad, who bought me this knife, who bought it for himself and for I to use and to touch and to admire and to have with us for emergencies, my dad passed away this past January. It was a pretty sudden thing. My mom, well, she's still reeling from it, but she's the one that was with him when he passed away. It all happened sort of in one morning. He was feeling kind of sick. She went to the pharmacy to go get him some medication that she thought he would need. By the time she got back, he was gone. It's a very difficult thing for her. It was a pretty hard thing for all of us. We've always been pretty close as siblings, but it brought us together in a way that nothing else really has. But we're recovering as a family. My mom, she's still reeling big time. And any of you guys out there who are inclined to pray, you're more than welcome to pray for my mom. She could certainly use it. But it is kind of nice though that I had the chance to bring this out, kind of look at it, talk about it, touch it again. Because as I said before, this is something that is very much connected to me and my dad. He thought this was really cool. At the time that I got my hands on it as a kid, I thought it was really cool. It served us on trips that we took. And again, it's really nice that I am able to have this today, not just remember it, but also have it in hand and think about, you know, all the memories that I have with it. Now, as I said before, I was debating whether or not to ever share that experience with you guys, my audience, just because it is so personal and because you as my audience, I know what you're here for. You're here to see cool gear, you're here to see good reviews, and I try to throw a little bit of my personality and some of my personal experiences into things as well, but I don't want this to turn into simply a vlogging kind of a channel where you're just completely wrapped around my life. That's not what I intended ever, and I don't want that now. But I felt like it was appropriate at this point to, given the item that I'm talking about, to go ahead and share that experience with you. So thanks for bearing with me. Once again, this is a tagging video, so Hank Strange, Doc Tac Dad, let's hear your stories about some gear that you're tied to in a very nostalgic way. And everybody else, I'd love to hear your stories down in the comments section. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm the Late Boy Scout. Take care.
My dad used to get ready to deer hunt, you know, late October every year. And he had this big blade hunting knife. It was a Soligan Germany kind of hunting knife. It had a stag handle on it and it had like a silver lion's head for a pommel. And I used to think that was the baddest ass knife in the world.